Punishing political dissent and disobedience, activists and government opponents are being silenced across the Gulf region. A Kuwaiti opposition leader is the latest to face jail. A suppression of freedom of expression or upholding law and order. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rida Fakhri. The voice of protest is growing ever stronger across Gulf states as activists gain in confidence from the Arab uprisings. But Gulf rulers are maintaining an equally strong response in the name of national security and stability. Kuwaiti opposition leader Musallam al-Barak has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for insulting the country's emir. The former legislator told a rally, quote, "We will not allow you, Your Highness, to take Kuwait into the abyss of autocracy." And he went on to say, "We no longer fear your prisons and your riot batons." Kuwait has seen a series of mass demonstrations against the ruling family, protests that by their very nature risk offending their leaders and testing the boundaries of what is tolerated and what is not. It's a mood prevailing in many of the Gulf nations. Qatari poet Mohammed Rashid Al-Ajami was jailed for life in November for reciting a poem critical of Qatar's leadership. The sentence was later reduced to 15 years on appeal. Last month, the co-founders of a civil and political rights association in Saudi Arabia were handed 5- and 10-year jail terms. And earlier this month, a court in Abu Dhabi sentenced a Twitter activist to 10 months in jail. And just last week, a human rights defender and blogger was arrested and detained in Oman. And the first annual report by the Gulf Center for Human Rights was published just last month, focusing on freedom of association and expression. It said many human rights defenders were subject to physical assault and verbal abuse. Violations varied from country to country, but ranged from arbitrary arrest and detention to harassment and intimidation. And the report added that internet sites, personal blogs, and social media accounts were hijacked or blocked. Let's discuss all of this with our guest in Kuwait City, Fahad Al-Shulaimi, a former army colonel, now a security analyst. Al-Shulaimi is the brother of a Kuwaiti member of parliament. Here in Qatar, Najib Al-Nuaimi, lawyer for the jailed Qatari poet and Qatar's former justice minister. Also in Kuwait City, joining us on Skype is Sarah Lee Whitson, executive director of the Middle East and North Africa division for Human Rights Watch. Fahad Al-Shulaimi, how does this case involving Musallam al-Barak in Kuwait affect freedom of expression, freedom of speech in the country? Has it silenced or strengthened dissent?
I think freedom of expression is not applying that stoning the police. It's freedom of expression, and freedom of gathering is not involving throwing Molotov on the police. Freedom of expression is not blocking the highways and asking an ID check for an unauthorized person.
But that isn't what al-Barak has been accused of. In fact, it isn't what the charge is all about, and it isn't certainly the reason officials have given for saying that he should be in jail for 5 years. He held a rally as an opposition member when electoral laws were changed a few months ago, saying that he believed the emir was taking the country into the abyss of autocracy.
No, I think this is a whole process. Head of a state, his person is immune and inviolable. This is by the Article 54 by the Kuwaiti Constitution. Mr. al-Barak, he passed that line. And we have a judicial system, and he didn't show up. So there is a primary verdict against him, and he's supposed to face that. Mr. al-Barak, instead, he chose to stay at home and bring all the media and try to justify his decision. I think the best solution that Mr. al-Barak turned himself in to the police. This is one. Secondly, he was lecturing and he was talking about respecting the law and the spirit of the law. I think this is time that Mr. al-Barak should go and face the law. If he's innocent, there are many people, they were on court and they have been innocent and they have been released. Mr. al-Barak chose that is he will go to the street battle, and that's why what we saw, disorder, violence, demonstrations, teenagers were in jail, teenagers throwing and stoning the police forces, and this is not acceptable.
Sarah Lee Whitson, you've been documenting this case in Kuwait for Human Rights Watch for some time. Does the picture you just heard Mr. Al-Shulaimi allude to fit with the reality on the ground? He said Mr. Al-Barak had crossed the line. Has he? Does the punishment in this case in any way fit the quote-unquote crime?
Well, I think he puts his finger on it when he talks about this vague notion of crossing the line. Under international law, there is no such line, and citizens, residents of a country are free to criticize the king, are free even to insult the king. That is a fundamental human right that sadly Kuwaiti law still does not recognize. And so if he's crossed the line, he's crossed an outdated, ancient, illegal, unlawful line that the Kuwaiti Penal Code still includes, because the Kuwaiti government still insists on prosecuting people because their speech is deemed insulting to the king. You know, if anything that the Arab world has come to terms with is that these days are over, these days are gone. The Arab people will no longer zip their lips and sit silent and not insult their king and not insult their governments, because they know they are free to speak their political opinions against anyone, including the king.
Najib Anouaimi, former Qatari Justice Minister, you have taken up the case of the Qatari poet who initially was sentenced to life in prison for insulting the emir and implicitly calling for his overthrow. That sentence was reduced to 15 years. In any country in the world, some might argue that calling for the overthrow or inciting for the overthrow of a government is illegal. Does Qatar in any way have a sound legal case against the poet?
I don't think so. There is a sound case because the Al-Ajmi, he wrote a poem really in reply to another poet who insulted him, and that's the end of it. But the way being interpreted by the Ministry of Culture here in Qatar by appointing some clerks working, within the ministry, they made an interpretation absolutely wrongly that he has insulted the emir and that he has attempted to overthrow. All this is absolutely rubbish because they don't really go and read the poem in the total context, because in the end of it he was praising the emir and he was praising the crown prince, praising as well, what we call it, saying good things, not bad things. But the intention is really to imprison him for another case, which is a Tunisia case. And they framed him in a way totally on the first instance court. They disregarded a lot of legal rights that he's supposed to be entitled for. On the appeal court, they just confirm what the first court did. And not only that, they went worse than the first by saying that he mentioned the emir's daughter in his poem, and that is totally wrong, because the word is means beautiful lady and not the daughter of the emir. However,
but they say, though, that they have a strong case against him. What made you take on the case as a former justice minister, someone who knows the legal system extremely well? How much faith do you have in its independence? How much faith do you have in the possibility of you prevailing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that, going through the experience on the first court and the second court, I don't have much of faith that the intention is really to imprison him. Whatever I would say, whatever I would write, I have said that if I had a jury sitting on that trial in front of them, even the police who were actually accompanying Al-Ajami told him, now we heard the oral pleading, you haven't done anything wrong. But the intention is to imprison him. That's it. You see, let me say something really in general on Gulf. Gulf governments have embraces the reformation of the Arab world. They put all their money, everything, media, and they were saying the same rulers that they are really standing up for the freedom of speech. They are standing up to have the Arab world really free and democracy and elected government. They, on the other hand, forgot that they have people sitting and living in the countries who are really listening and watching. Definitely.
Fahad al-Shulaimi, forgive me for interrupting. Is there a lot of hypocrisy between what some of the authorities and leaders in these countries say and the reality on the ground? And have, in fact, some of the authorities in Kuwait, for example, in other Gulf countries, made a huge mistake by going after some of these people who are against their rule, who want a bigger space for debate, not so much inciting for the overthrow of any government, but wanting to debate the nature, the shape a government should take? Has there been a huge mistake in going after them and in fact elevating them instead of silencing them?
Yes, you see that the problem with different cultures. When Michael, she was talking about the king, well, we have Amir, we don't have king. In Kuwait, mainly. Secondly, we want our own culture. We want our own traditional way. We want our own procedures, our own ethics, our own religion. You cannot apply the Western suit against the Gulf dishdasha or the Gulf traditional dress. We want to tailor our culture. We want to tailor our law according to what is applied to us, to what is good for us. The transition needs time. Yes, we live in a bureaucratic and traditional government. We need time to modernize this. We are moving forward. I'm talking about Kuwait especially. We have a constitution and we have a mandate and we have a national assembly. So all performance or variables of democratic procedure is there. Now, we cannot accept some people come and live for 1 year or 2 years and try to teach us how we live or how we govern or how we do that. Although I have a great respect for the Human Rights Watch, but I could refer and I quote for their executive director on December 7th, 2012, he praised the Emir of Kuwait to cancel cases against media. The Emir of Kuwait cancelled many cases against the media. So, in conclusion, yes, we need to improve forward. We are going forward, but we need time, but we want to do it by our own way. If you look to the other countries, if you refer to the Arabic Spring in other countries, look to Egypt, look to Syria, look to Libya, look to Yemen, where there is 51% under poverty line. Look to Egypt, where there's 220 million losses so far. 17% of the tourism sector is disabled. Look to Tunisia. So there are many bad examples. What we want to do, we want transitional changes, not transformational changes.
Sarah Lee Whitson, I think we got the picture. Let Sarah Lee Whitson perhaps respond to this. We want to do it our own way. Is this an issue of culture? Should specific cultures be looked at? And when one talks about human rights and how they should be applied, should it perhaps not be necessarily an approach of one-size-fits-all justice?
You know, I think that the speaker is using a very outdated, worn-out, tired old excuse of culture. That excuse expired about 30 years ago, because what we're talking about is not Western values or Eastern values. We're talking about universal human rights. And when the gentleman says, we want to do it our cultural way and we want to do it our traditional way, well, I think there are many we's in Kuwait who strongly disagree with him, in case we wouldn't be here on this show talking about the fact that many Kuwaitis want to be able to criticize the emir, want to be able to criticize the government, and don't want to go to jail for it. So when we say we want this and we want that, let's be careful and not pretend that we are speaking for all Kuwaitis. What many Kuwaitis want, and I think it's insulting to even suggest that the Arab people have a different culture that makes them not want freedom of speech, that makes them say, no, we want to zip our lip and bow down before the emir and never insult him. And if we insult the emir, please throw us in jail. I think that's a mockery and a shame and an insult to all of the Arab people who I think all across the Arab world, from Tunisia all the way to Yemen, have made it clear and continue to make it clear that they want to express their political opinions as a matter of their human rights, their basic rights, just like every other person in the world.
What about the Western backing these leaderships in the Gulf get, despite some of these abuses you mentioned? Do the rulers of Gulf countries feel that they can in fact, get away with so much, partly, if not largely, because of the backing they get from the West?
I don't know if it's largely, certainly it's partly. I mean, I think the hypocrisy of Western governments is showing itself day in and day out, and the broken promises of Prime Minister Cameron and President Obama to stand with the people of the Arab world has been abundantly clear when we've seen the resumption of arms sales to Bahrain without any preconditions, despite the broken reform promises of the Independent Commission of Inquiry, not to mention the recent planned kowtowing of both the British and American governments in the Emirates for a further billions of dollars in arms sales. But that can't be the excuse or the reason. What we're talking about is what people inside Kuwait, inside the Emirates, inside each and every of these countries is making clear when they stand out and speak their minds, whether it's by Twitter and Facebook.
Well, we've been talking about the stick, if you like, in many respects, to discourage dissent. But there's also been the carrot, that is, incentives to keep people happy. In February 2011, just days after Hosni Mubarak had been toppled from power in Egypt, Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah announced a huge increase in domestic public spending. The kingdom planned to spend $37 billion on housing, wage increases, unemployment benefits, and other programs. The Emir of Qatar announced a similar move in September 2011. Public sector workers enjoyed a 60% pay rise, while military personnel saw a hike of 120%. And last year, Oman pledged to boost state spending by more than a quarter over 4 years, from $111 billion to $143 billion. That was to tackle rising unemployment that triggered unrest months earlier. Najib and Noaimi, you just heard about some of the financial generosity that many people in the region have been given in recent months, in the last couple of years. Is it also, in a way, trying to buy the loyalty of the citizens, essentially asking them to forego their political rights in exchange for sharing in some of the financial wealth?
This is true. Been actually historically that always the ruler is the one who give money, and the people really sometimes they beg for the money or try to make some noises, and he give them some money, then they keep them silent. People don't live on food and on drink and on cars and air conditioning. People live on to have their humanity being exercised. They have the right to express. Take all the money, take the 60%, take 100% of all the salaries of the people, but let them really feel free. Not only free, exercise their own way of life. Where they can criticize, where they can elect their own government, where they can form a better way of legal system, a judicial system. The problem that we have inherited laws, and we inherited a type of a judicial system which really do not work these days, because communities, Arab communities in general, the Gulf in particular, become very well educated using all this kind of social media. These tools are really now communicating the minds of these people. The matter is not the money. Yes, they might say, okay, I live here much better than the one who live in Somalia or in Sudan or in Egypt. This is the stupid, really, a comparison. If I want to shut my mouth, I'll shut my mouth because I eat and drink, just like animals. But this is not the way. We need to reform our laws, our judicial system, our constitution as well. Maybe Kuwait is a bit advanced than Qatar on the constitution. Maybe it's better, more advanced Saudi Arabia. But still, we still have defects in our legal system and judicial system and the constitutional system. There should be no more that people should shut their mouth if they want to express either towards the ruler or whoever official in this government. And that is really the human intention. We all, as a government in the Gulf, recognize the human rights, and we recognize really the universal of Declaration of Human Rights, and all the principle of the right to speak and not to be silent is there, but we don't practice it.
Well, one place where it used to be practiced to a certain extent, Fahad Shulaimi, is Kuwait, one place that was always considered to have a politically vibrant community where there was political public dissent, where in fact opposition members wielded considerable influence within parliament, even calling for investigations into corruption, summoning government officials for questioning. Has that all stopped? Has it all changed because of the unease that the leadership feels as a result of the Arab uprisings?
No, I don't think so, because it is in the Constitution, and it's on the mandate or the 36th article of the Constitution and 37 of the Constitution about freedom of press, freedom of research. But as I told you, we do not want a foreign address. We want to do it by our own way. Transitional is much better than transformational. History proves that. We show that. This is one. Second, our political culture is not that mature yet. We need time to tailor this political culture. I agree with my friend.
But you had someone asking for reform of the political system, Musallam al-Barrak, doing it in a rally, simply criticizing the government, asking for change, saying that the electoral changes that were made by decree, not after a debate in Parliament. Was he wrong?
No, but if Musallam al-Barrak was a member in the Kuwaiti parliament for 16 years, according to the constitutions, and he followed all the constitution that we have. Musallam al-Barrak, if he wants two things. He wants a monarchy, elected government with a monarchy system. If he wants to change the constitution, he should go to the National Assembly and suggest, and could be debated, and this change. But going to the street or going to the media will not change that. The best way is go to the democratic means and democratic tools.
Again, many people would suggest that was precisely what he was trying to do.
Constitutional changes.
That he was asking, and he wanted to be part of a debate to look at what shape the government should take. Sarah Lee Whitson, was this a crime?
No, I mean, it wasn't a crime. And, you know, the amusing thing is, in fact, when the government, when the monarch feels threatened by the parliament or proposed legislative changes, what the emir does is shut down the parliament whenever he feels like it. And that is, in fact, the kind of democracy and democratic rights that people are being allowed, which is that their emir, whenever he feels like it, shuts down the parliament and in fact authorizes to itself the right to pass a new electoral law. Isn't that what the parliament is supposed to do? You know, I think that the speaker is very right in saying that Kuwait has been a space for a lot of democratic transition and progress. And we have, in fact, noted the fact that the emir generously stopped some prosecutions in December of last year. But what we've seen just in the past 3 months is prosecutions every single month against Kuwaiti citizens for insulting the emir. Every single month, January, February, March, April. And so what we're seeing now in Kuwait is a dangerous, terrible backsliding and a turning away from the good tradition, the good culture of Kuwait of having open political debate. It is the Kuwaiti government, it is the Kuwaiti emir that is going against the culture of the Kuwaiti people to have open, public, vibrant debate.
In the minute left to us, let me just direct my question to Najib and Noaimi. You spoke earlier about the need to reform the judicial system, the legal systems across the Gulf region. Recently, all of the GCC countries have come on board and signed up to what is known as the Joint Security Agreement led by Saudi Arabia to try to harmonize the legal systems of all these countries. Activists would say to the detriment of human rights in the region. How much of a setback have civil liberties taken?
Well, a setback really was very damaging, but we have to understand that people now become very much aware of their rights. They become very much aware of the consequences, even if they will go, you know, towards the government, for example, in criticizing the emir or criticizing the system. They know the result, what's going to be in prison, or sometime they could be, you know, dealt with in a different way, not necessarily to be imprisoned. But however, the formation is coming and is taking place, and we need to be more faster. We need really the ruler to understand that we in the Gulf are not really a territory which is belong to them as an ownership, and they are not the lords of the Gulf states.
We'll have to leave it here. Let me thank all our guests, Najib Noaimi, Fahad Al-Shulaybi and Sarah Lee Whitson. And thank you as always for joining us on Inside Story. From me, Rida Fakhri and the team, thanks for watching.